we all began laughing, all of us. And that was a moment of commonality. A Klan leader and a black guy sitting in a motel room at the same table, agreeing, disagreeing, and now we're all laughing. But we were laughing at how ignorant we were, all of us, And I say that I won't say it was a learning moment at that moment, but it was a teaching moment at that moment. The learning would come later.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Living and Leading with Emotional Intelligence. I'm your host, Brittney-Nichole. This episode is going to be slightly different from the formats of other upcoming episodes. Most people that I interview know that they're going to be on the show Living and Leading with Emotional Intelligence, and there is a specific format for that. However, what you're about to see is an interview that I had with Daryl Davis several weeks ago, and I was interviewing Daryl for my book, The EQ Deficiency. I feel like Daryl's message is so fitting, and Daryl lives and leads with emotional intelligence on a daily basis. So I asked him at the end of our interview if he would be okay with me using some of the footage for this show. Daryl Davis is an international blues musician who has played with the greats like B.B. King, Jerry Lewis, and Chuck Berry. But Daryl also is a global change agent, and since an incident, which you will hear about in just a minute, that happened at age 10 when he first discovered racism, Daryl decided to make it his life's mission to answer one question, and that is, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? So we're going to pick up when I'm asking Daryl to start from the beginning and share his story. You'll see midway that it kind of diverts to a different discussion. In between that discussion, we were talking about my book and the purpose of interviewing him, and then it picks up from there and carries on. But I think that you will find this to be an extremely eye-opening and inspirational message. And Daryl has been featured on Morgan Freeman's series, The Story of Us, which is on Netflix. He's been interviewed by PBS, CNN, he's been on NPR, and he also has several TED Talks, which I will put the links to most everything that I can in the description of this video. So I would highly recommend you checking those out. So enjoy. Here's Daryl Davis. I appreciate all you're doing. And so I hope I don't have you repeat your story, like parts of it too much, because I'm sure you've told this story.
Well, it's okay. I want you to get it accurate.
So let's start with, just tell me a little bit about where you were brought up. I know you said that you were born in Chicago and then your parents moved to Massachusetts. Now, was that when you were 10 or did the incident happen when you were 10?
I was born in Chicago. I'm 62 years old now. I was born in Chicago, but my parents, they're from Virginia. They just happened to be in Chicago because of my dad's job at the time. But they were U.S. Foreign Service, United States State Department. So I grew up as an American embassy brat, living all over the world. And so we would go live in a foreign country for 2 years, as my dad worked for the American embassy. And then we would come back home, usually during the summer. We'd be here, the summer months. Sometimes we'd be here for a year and then get reassigned to another country for 2 years and then come back and forth, back and forth. I lived in Africa, I lived in Europe, and visited many, many countries in between, starting at the age of 3. So we had just come back home in 1968 from an overseas assignment, and I was age 10. I was born in 1958. And we went to Massachusetts because my dad was going to complete his master's degree at Boston University. And we went out into the schools, and I was in 4th grade at age 10. The schools in Boston were so bad. I'm not kidding you. The kids were still learning, believe it or not, in my school, the kids were still learning the ABCs in 4th grade.
Wow.
That bad, okay? And now I thought it was funny. I thought it was hilarious because I was 10 years old. I didn't know any better. I knew my ABCs in kindergarten. And when I had, about 2 weeks later or something, I had come home and told my parents that. They didn't think it was funny. And they were like, we're out of here. And we moved to the suburbs of Belmont, Massachusetts. And I was one of 2 Black kids in the entire school. I was in 4th grade, and there was a little Black girl in 2nd grade. So I really didn't see a whole lot of her, except for like at recess and lunchtime. So consequently, all of my friends were white. And several of my male friends were members of the Cub Scouts. And they invited me to join. And, this is, I guess, fall of 67, going into the 68 year. And I joined, and it was a lot of fun, all that kind of stuff. And then we had a parade from Lexington to Concord to commemorate the ride of Paul Revere during the Revolutionary War. And Lexington and Concord were like right there, right next door to Belmont. And so it was Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Brownies, Girl Scouts, 4-H Club, all kinds of different organizations. And I was the only Black person in this parade.
Wow.
And the streets were like blocked off. We're all marching. And the sidewalks on either side were like lined with white people. And they're all waving and cheering and, all that kind of thing. Oh, you can't see me, can you? I mean, there you go. I didn't realize it was off.
No,
Okay, so anyway, everybody's cheering and, carrying on and yelling the British are coming and that kind of thing. And as we got further down the parade route, all of a sudden I began getting hit with objects, bottles, soda pop cans and things like that. And there's some yelling going on. And there was just a group to my right of maybe 4 or 5 people. That's what I remember. I remember there being a couple kids and a couple of adults. I didn't know if they were related or, or just random strangers grouped together or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, my first thought was, those people over there don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was, because I'd never had anything like that happen to me before. So that was my natural assumption. I didn't realize that I was the sole target of this action until my den mother, my cub master, my troop leader, they all came running and covered me with their bodies and quickly escorted me out, of the danger. And I kept saying, well, why? I didn't say anything to them. I didn't do anything. They're like, shh, go along, Daryl, hurt. Go on, move on. It'll be okay. So, they weren't even telling me why this was happening. And, you remember when you were 10, if you had a question, you had to have an answer. And if the answer wasn't forthcoming, you began to create your own answers to explain it, to placate your curiosity. So I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe they're testing me because I'm the new kid on the block. I hadn't been there that long. I had every excuse but the right excuse. So now, understand something. When I was overseas, okay, so you'll understand the way I think. When I was overseas, my classroom, my classes, my classmates, they came from Germany, France, Italy, Japan, Nigeria, Czechoslovakia, Russia. Whoever had an embassy in those countries, all of their kids went to the same school. So
wow,
if
you were exposed early.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It looked exactly like a United Nations of little kids. That's exactly what my class looked like, which was unheard of in this country at the time. So when I would come back home after my parents' assignment here to my own country, I would be in either all Black schools or Black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. And back then in the early 60s and even mid 60s, we didn't have the amount of diversity in the classroom that I had overseas or that we have today. Today, you walk into a city classroom, people are all mixed from anywhere and everywhere. But that was not the case in the 1960s. It was either all Black kids or all white kids or Black and white kids. You might find one random Hispanic kid or one random Asian kid, but not like today.
Mm-hmm.
So I got along with everybody, people from all over the world. So I could not imagine somebody attacking me because of the color of my skin. That never happened before. So I didn't know why this had happened. Well, we finished the march, and when I got home, my mother and father, they had not attended the parade, and they were cleaning me up and putting Band-Aids on me and asking me, how did I fall down and get all scraped up? And I told them, I said, I didn't fall down. I told them what happened. And for the first time in my life, my parents sat me down and explained, I'm an only child. My parents sat me down and explained to me what racism was. Now, because of what I just told you, my precedent, I had never heard the word racism before. I had no clue what they were talking about. There was no reason for me to even know anything about it because I never experienced it. And so why would they be telling me about something that, I knew nothing about? And when they were telling me this, I wasn't believing them because my 10-year-old brain could not wrap itself around the idea that just because of my skin color, people, would judge me, who had never spoken to me, who had never seen me, who knew nothing about me, would just want to hurt me, because of this. It made no sense. And so my parents, who I trusted up to that point, 100%, anytime I had a problem, anytime I had a question that I couldn't figure out, my parents, gave me the answer or solution, or they gave me the tools by which I could get it myself. And my parents had never lied to me, never. But on this day, I knew they were lying because it made no sense to me whatsoever.
Wow.
And really, I did not believe them. They were lying, and I didn't know why they were lying. It's some kind of a joke they're trying to pull on me. Mm-hmm. Well, about a month and a half or so later, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I remember it very well. Nearby Boston burned to the ground, as did every city in this country, every major city. There was, rioting, looting, burning, destruction, buildings just set on fire, and people, getting shot, people getting arrested, people getting beat by the police, and all kinds of craziness going on. And so then I realized that this thing called racism does exist because all of this was happening due to this racism thing. So now I realized that racism did exist, but I did not know why. Why were people racist? So I can accept it exists, but why? And I formed a question in my mind, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And so now for the next 52 years from then, I'm 62 now, I've been looking for the answer to that question. And as a teenager, well, shortly thereafter, at the end of that summer, we went back overseas on my dad's new assignment to another country. And once again, I was around what I called normalcy. The word multicultural did not even exist back then, but to me, that was the norm. And but every time I'd come home, there'd be some incident. Well, as a teenager, I bought a bunch of books and stuff on Black supremacy, white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, anti-Semitism, the Nazis in Germany, and the neo-Nazis over here, trying to get the answer to the question. All of my books talked about it, but none of them explained why people thought that way. And I just knew, I don't know if it was intuitively or just common sense wise, I knew in my mind and in my heart that people were not born that way. This mentality was acquired. It was learned behavior. And so I knew if something could be learned, it could also be unlearned. And I bought these books to find out why. Where does it come from? Where is it going? How can it be addressed? But none of them explained that, as to why it existed. So I graduated high school in '76 and went right to college. I majored in music at Howard University, got my degree, and graduated from there in 1980 and became a professional musician. But while music was my profession, studying race on my own was my obsession. And there were no classes you could go study it. There's no such thing as Race 101, and I don't even think that exists today. So I just continued, obsessing on this. And country music made a resurgence in our country. It had gone away for a while and then became popular again. There'd been this movie with John Travolta called Urban Cowboy, had this mechanical bull and all this country line dancing and stuff. So all the bars and clubs that were playing top 40 music switched over to country and began hiring country bands. So, if you wanted to work, and work all the time, you played country. And so I joined this country band, and I was the only Black guy in the band, and consequently, usually the only Black guy wherever we played. And we played this bar in a town called Frederick, Maryland. Frederick, Maryland is about an hour and 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. And this bar was called the Silver Dollar Lounge. And the Silver Dollar Lounge was known to be an all-white bar. And by all-white, what I'm saying in this context, not that Black people were forbidden to come in. That's not the case. They could go if they wanted to, but they did not go. And that was by their own choice. And usually it was a good choice because they were not welcome there. And so, when you go somewhere where you're not welcome and alcohol is involved, it doesn't make for a good combination, right? So, So here I was in this Silver Dollar Lounge with this band. Now the band had played there before, but this was my first time, in the place. And we had just finished playing a set of music and taking a break. And I was following the band over to this table to just, sit down and take our break. And this white guy came up behind me and put his arm around my shoulder and says, "Hey, I really enjoy your all's music." And I said, "Thank you." And I shook his hand. And then he pointed at the stage and he said, "I've seen this here band before, but I ain't never seen you before. Where did you come from?" And I explained to the guy, "Yeah, you probably did see them because they told me they played here before, but I just joined the band. I'm new." And he goes, "Yeah, well, I sure like your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a Black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis." Now, you know who Jerry Lee Lewis is? Because you look kind of young to me. Okay.
I did my research. I didn't prior to, but now, yes.
Okay. So, so anyway, I was not offended by his statement, but I was kind of surprised because the guy was, 15, 18 years older than me. And I figured, certainly he knows the Black origin of that style of music. And I innocently asked him, I said, "Well, where do you think Jerry Lee Lewis learned how to play?" And I wasn't trying to be facetious. I was, where are you coming from? And he says, "Well, Jerry Lee invented that or whatever." And I said, No. I said, he learned to play from the same place I did, from Black blues and boogie woogie piano players. That's where rock and roll and rockabilly came from. "Oh, no. Jerry Lee invented that. I ain't never seen no Black man play like that, blah, blah, blah."
So because he hadn't seen it.
Because he hadn't seen it, so therefore it must not exist.
Exactly.
And see, now this is very important to your research as well. One's perspective is one's reality, as you well know. So as you pointed out, because he'd never seen it, then therefore it does not exist. So that's his perspective. So even after I told the man, "Look, I know Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a friend of mine. He's told me himself where he learned how to play." The guy did not buy that I knew Jerry Lee. He thought I was, pulling his leg or whatever, and didn't buy that Jerry Lee learned anything from Black people. But he was fascinated enough that he wanted to buy me a drink. And I don't drink, but I went back to his table and had a cranberry juice. And he paid the waitress, and he takes his glass and he clinks my glass and cheers me. And he makes this proclamation, like he says, "This is the first time I ever sat down with a Black man and had a drink." Now I'm kind of baffled because, again, given my background, I've been around people from all over the world, and this guy's older than me. And by this time in my life, I had sat down with thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a conversation, a beverage. How is it that this man had never done that?
Wow.
And so I innocently asked him, I said, "Why?" And he didn't answer me. He stared down at the table, and I asked him again. He didn't answer. And he had a friend sitting next to him who elbowed him and said, "Tell him, tell him, tell him." I said, "Tell me." Then he looked back up at me and he said, just as plain as day, he said, "I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan." And I burst out laughing uncontrollably.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't nervous laughter. I thought it was funny because
You've been
uh,
studying them for a while at this
exactly,
point.
yeah, and I didn't believe him because I've read. I own just about every book written on the Klan. I still do. I have a vast library in my basement, and I've read them all. And his behavior did not depict that of Klan people in my books, you know. And so, I knew this guy was kidding me. He was making some kind of a joke, and I thought it was funny. And in my mind, um, I was justifying him saying that because I'm thinking, okay, he thought I was pulling his leg about Jerry Lee Lewis, so he's going to jerk me around about being a member of the Klan, tit for tat kind of thing. And while I'm laughing, he leaned up and put his hand down in his pants and pulled out his wallet out of his pocket and went through it and handed me his Klan membership card. I looked at it. I said, "Ooh." I recognized the Ku Klux Klan insignia, which is this red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop in the center of the cross. I said, "Ooh, this thing is for real." And so I stopped laughing and I gave it back to him. And we talked about the Klan and other things. But the guy was like, really friendly, and it just baffled me. So I just sat there and talked to him, and he gave me his phone number. And he wanted me to call him whenever I was to return to this bar with this band, because he wanted to bring his friends, meaning Klansmen and Klanswomen, to see this black guy play piano like Jerry Lee. And I said, okay, I'll call him. So we were there every 6 months. Every 6 weeks on rotations with other bands and for the weekend. So I'd call him on a Wednesday or a Thursday and say, hey, man, we're going to be at the Silver Dollar. Come on out. He'd come. He'd come both Friday and Saturday. And he'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen with him. And, they came in regular street clothes. They didn't come in their robes and hoods. And
that would be awkward.
Yeah, that would. Although I have seen that. But anyway, they, yeah, oh yeah. They'd come and they'd watch me play and they'd get out and dance and carry on. And then on the break, I'd mingle around and I'd make my way over to his table to say hello. Some of them were curious about me and they would hang at the table to meet me and talk to me. And others would see me coming and they'd get up and scurry off, some other part of the room. In other words, they wanted nothing to do with me, just to look at me from afar.
You were entertainment and
I was entertainment
for something.
Yeah, and not to be associated with.
Yeah, wow.
So, that was fine. I wasn't going to pursue them if they didn't want to meet me. So, I'd sit down and hang out with the ones, that did, and, talk to them and stuff. So shortly after that, I quit that band, and I went back to playing rock and roll and blues and R&B and whatever else was top 40, whatever else was happening then, And I'd more or less forgotten about him because it wasn't like I had a relationship with him when I wasn't playing. I would only see him when I was in that area, and I'd call him to come out and see me. But on my day off, it wasn't like I went to Frederick and hang out with the Klan, And a little while later, it dawned on me, Daryl, you blew it. The answer to your question that's been plaguing you since age 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me, fell right into your lap, and you didn't take advantage of it. Who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization whose whole premise is hating people who don't look like them and who don't believe as they believe. You need to get a hold of that guy and sit him down and question him and get your answer, because you establish a relationship with him, and you can talk about it. So I thought, yeah, this is a good idea. And, time had passed since I'd seen him or talked to him. And my mom had passed away in the interim. So, that put me on another, I had to put everything else aside and take care of all that. And then when I finally got back to it, I had to find his number. I found his number, gave him a call. The number had been disconnected. So it took me a couple of weeks to track him down. And he had moved. He didn't have a phone, but he had an address. So, but I had no way of contacting him, to let him know I wanted to see him or talk to him. So I just went over to his address, where he moved to, and it was an apartment. I knocked on the door, totally unexpected, because he doesn't know I'm coming. And he opens the door, and he sees me. Like, Daryl, what are you doing here? And he stepped out into the hallway, and I looked up and down the hallway to see if I brought anybody with me. These people are paranoid. And so when he stepped out of his apartment, I stepped in. And so he turned around and came back in. And he says, what's going on, man? Are you still playing? What's going on? I said, yeah, I'm still playing. But listen, I need to talk to you about the Klan. And he says, the Klan? I said, yeah, you're a member, right? And he says, well, I was, you know that. He goes, but I quit. And he went into this long dissertation as to why he quit, which is a funny story in itself. I'll tell you about it later. And so we talked, and I said, well, where's all your Klan stuff? And he says, what do you mean, my robe and hood? I said, yeah. He says, well, they came and got it. I said, what do you mean they came and got it? Don't you own your robe and hood? And he went on to explain to me, which I later found out to be true, that when you join, you can pay for everything, the robe and hood and other, the handbook and all that kind of stuff. You can pay for it all up front as yours to take home with you and keep. If you cannot afford it, you can still take it, but you pay a little bit every dues period, a little bit extra to go towards it until you pay it off. So apparently he had not paid off his robe and hood, but he had said that, so they took it. But he said when they came to get it, that he was unable to find the mask that covered the face and attached to the hood when they came to get it. And he had since found it, and he had to return it. And I asked if I could see it. And he went back to, I guess, his bedroom somewhere and returned and handed me this mask. And I'm looking at it, holding it, looking at it. And I asked him if he knew Roger Kelly. Roger Kelly was the Grand Dragon. Grand Dragon means state leader. Imperial Wizard means national leader. And he says, yeah, I know Roger. Roger's my Grand Dragon. And I said, well, I want you to hook me up with Mr. Kelly. I'm going to write a book on the Klan, and I want to go around the country interviewing different Klan leaders and people, members. And I want to start right here in Maryland. So, I need you to hook me up with Mr. Kelly. He goes, Daryl, I can't do that. I said, well, why not? He goes, no, I can't bring a black man. I can't bring a black man to the Grand Dragon. And I said, well, but you're not in the Klan anymore. He goes, it doesn't matter. We both would get in trouble. So I begged and pleaded. And I said, listen, you said that you need to return this mask. He says, yeah. I said, give me Mr. Kelly's phone number and address, and I will go to his house, and I'll return it for you. He snatched that thing right out of my hand. Said, no way. So after I just kept hammering at it, he finally agreed to give me this information on the condition that I not tell Mr. Kelly where I got his personal information. I said, okay. So he wrote it all out for me and stuff. And long story short, he told me, don't fool with Roger Kelly. Roger Kelly will kill you. Do not go to his house. And he indicated that there was a bar in Thurmont, Maryland, which was a Klan bar, as he called it. Now, by Klan bar, he doesn't mean that the Klan owns it. What he means is that's where they hang out. And Thurmont, Maryland, Thurmont, Maryland. You've never been there, but you know it because it's the home of Camp David, the presidential retreat. But it was also one of the headquarters for the Maryland Ku Klux Klan. They don't talk about that part, right? But the news always talks about Camp David. So Thurmont is an all-white town. Really? And anytime a black family or interracial family has moved there, they've got a cross burned in their yard, and they move right out. Now, this is not to say that all white people in Thurmont are in the Klan. They're not. In fact, most of the white people in Thurmont do not like the Klan and wanted them out of there. But that's, that was the reputation of Thurmont. So he says, you go there on any Saturday night. If the Klan is in town, if they're not out of town rallying somewhere, they gather around in that bar. And when you go in, the first two booths on the left, you walk in the door, there'll be a row of booths. The first two closest to the door are reserved for the Klan. And that's where you probably find Roger Kelly. He says, I don't guarantee that he'll even talk to you, but you're probably safer to go into a public place than go on his property. I said, okay. So I thanked him and I left, and he reminded me not to tell, Mr. Kelly, where I got the info. And he warned me again, don't fool with this guy. So I asked my secretary, if I had, I knew I didn't have any Saturdays off, being a full-time musician. But I figured, Sunday is still part of the weekend. Maybe I'd find it there on a Sunday if I was lucky. I knew I had a few Sundays off. So I called her and asked her, what Sundays do I have off? And she told me. Now she's white. And I only mention that not because it matters to me, but because it's part of the story. She said, I picked a Sunday, said, okay, I'm going to go up there on this Sunday and see if I can find him. Well, she wants to go with me. And that's where I drew the line. I said, oh, no. This would not be good. A black man walking into a Klan bar with a white woman. That's why I do not want her to go. Well, she was very insistent. And so I said, okay, you can come at your own risk. And so, Sunday rolled around, she came down to my house, we drove up to Thurmont. And Thurmont is about an hour from me. And so just under an hour from me. And my guy gave me perfect directions. Boom, there it was. And so there were like 4 or 5 little steps, a stoop, and then the door into the bar. And so we're sitting in my car looking at this place, trying to figure out, okay, how do we do this, And so we got out of the car and I told her, I said, listen, I'm going to walk in first. You walk in right behind me, stay close to me. I said, if I turn around and face you, start running and I'll be behind you. And she says, okay. So we got out and we walked into this bar. As soon as I opened the door, I stepped right in. And the place was like pretty much empty, maybe 6 or 7 people in there. First thing I saw, as soon as I walk in, is this big Confederate flag on the back wall. And then off to my left, just like the guy told me, was this row of booths. And there was nobody in any of the booths, not the first 2 closest to the door that are reserved for the Klan, none of the back ones, anything. On the right side was this long wooden bar and a big mirror on the wall behind the bar. But scotch taped to the mirror was this article and picture from the Washington Post, our newspaper up here, that had a picture of Roger Kelly. They had interviewed him about something, and somebody had cut out the article and posted it on the mirror. And so I knew I was in the right place, right? And I recognized it because I had the same article. I got all that stuff. And there were, like I said, maybe 6 or 7 people in there, a couple guys in the back playing pool, a couple guys just milling around, a couple guys sitting at the bar. Now, everybody in there was white, but that does not mean everybody in there was in the Klan. And so, I'm looking at these people, and none of them looked like Roger Kelly. I'd never met him, but I'd seen him. I'd seen him on TV. I'd seen his picture in the paper, so I would recognize him. None of them looked like him. And I didn't know if anybody, there was in the Klan or not. And basically, I felt stupid just standing in the middle of this bar, not knowing what to do because I was not, finding what I was looking for. And I didn't want to just walk up to somebody and say, hey, excuse me, sir, are you in the Klan? So I said to Mary, I said, come on, let's go over here and sit in one of these first 2 booths that's reserved for the Klan. Because if they're in here, they'll come to us. We don't have to worry about going to them. They'll come to us.
Wow, you're bold. You are bold. Wow.
It was more curiosity than courage. And I figured, they'll come to us to get us out of the booth. And then we can ask about Roger Kelly. So that was my strategy. So we go and we sit down in one of their booths. And nobody bothered us. Everything was cool. Nobody said anything. So we were there for a little while. Nothing happened. So we got up and moved to the bar and had a soft drink there. And I chatted with the guy sitting next to me like I was lost looking for the highway. He gave me directions, very polite, and we left. So I did not accomplish what I had set out to do. And this was on a Sunday evening, like around 7:30. So Mary worked out of my house. And so Monday morning she comes down and I give her Roger Kelly's phone number. And I said, listen, wait until, 5 o'clock, after 5, when people get off work and stuff, give this guy a call and tell him that you're working for somebody who's writing a book on the Klan. Would he consent to sitting down and giving your boss an interview? However, do not tell Mr. Kelly that I'm Black. Now, the reason I did not want him to know was this. Well, first of all, I could have called him myself. I'm the one who had the number, but I preferred that Mary call him. The reason why I did not want to call him was two things. One, he might pick up in my voice that I'm Black and say, I'm not talking to you, click. And my whole project would have ended before it ever got started. And second reason, if he knew that I was Black and he agreed to do the interview, he might have different answers prepared in the interim than he would have for a white interviewer asking the same questions. So I wanted it to be candid, spontaneous. And so I also knew that if Mary called him, he would know automatically by her voice that she's white. And I knew the mentality. He would not automatically assume that this white woman was working for a Black man, especially a Black man who's writing a book on the Klan, because they didn't exist.
Exactly.
Right? So everything was very well thought out, right?
I see.
Yeah. And so, but I told her, I said, listen, if he asks, don't lie to him, tell him, but don't allude to it. Don't give him reason to ask. You know how to do this. She goes, yeah, okay. So she calls the guy. She gets a hold of him, and he agrees to do the interview. He didn't ask what color I was. And so we initially he invited us over to his house, and something had been booked for that day. So I told her to call back and reschedule it. And I said, listen, let's make it in a neutral place. So we booked it in the to come to the motel above the Silver Dollar Lounge. The lounge is in the bottom of this motel. So she did, and he agreed. And Mary and I went there like several hours early, because the Klan will send out people to scout out a place before they bring one of their leaders. Just like, if Trump or Obama or whoever was going to appear in Charlotte, the Secret Service would be there first, check it out, and before they bring him, right? So, they, like I said, they're all very paranoid. And so, we got there several hours early, just in case any of his little scouts were around. I didn't want, them to report back, this guy you're going to meet is Black or whatever. So I sent Mary in to get the room, and she got the room, and then we didn't have cell phones back then. I called her from the restaurant, the payphone. I called the motel and asked for, that room. And so she told me what room it was in. So I just, zipped around the back and up the stairs and went to the room. And I gave her some money and sent her down the hallway to get some soda pop out of the machine and fill up the ice bucket and get it all cold. So, I want to be hospitable and offer my guest, a cold drink. And so she did all that. And the way the room was just laid out, just by design, if you were standing in the doorway in the hall, looking into the room, you could not see who was in the room, because it was like a wall there. You'd like walk around the wall, and then the room was back there. So you had to like be halfway in the room. So I recognized this, that nobody, if I stood over there, somebody in the door could not see me. So I said, okay, I want to get this person in the room before they see me, because if I meet them at the door, they might change their mind, because they're not expecting a Black guy, right? And so I took the lamp table and I put it in the most obscure corner of the room, took the lamp off, and set a chair on one side for Mr. Kelly and a chair on this side for me. And I had a black duffel bag beside my chair, and in the bag I had a copy of the Bible, and I had a cassette recorder and blank cassettes. And I set the cassette recorder on the table, all in hopes that he would, allow me to record the interview. I had no idea what this man was going to do. Would he, once he saw me, would he refuse to talk to me and walk away? Would he attack me, or would he come in and sit down and do the interview? But in any event, I wanted him on my territory. I did not want him in the hallway. It's just like, if you're going to play a sports game, basketball game or football game, whatever, you always do better on your own court or your own field. So I wanted him in my room. That's why I wasn't really hiding, but I was more obscured until he came in my room and he was in my territory. So anyway, I'm all set. And the time was set for 5:15, and right on time, punctual, boom, boom, boom on the door, knock, knock, knock. And Mary hops up and runs around the corner to open the door. And I'm seated at my table. And so in comes this bodyguard, and he's wearing military camouflage and that Klan patch right there, that red circle, white cross thing. And over here, the initials KKK. And on his beret was embroidered Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And on his hip, in a holster, he had a semi-automatic handgun. And he comes in, and Mr. Kelly was walking right behind him in a dark blue suit and tie. And this bodyguard turned the corner and just froze, when he saw me. His eyes went boom. And Mr. Kelly could not see around him and didn't realize that his guy had stopped short. So he got slammed into the back of him and knocked him forward. And so now they're stumbling around, both of them, trying to regain their balance. And it's like somebody who gets rear-ended,
Right.
And I'm sitting there, just looking at them, and I could read their body language. I could read the expressions on their face. They didn't have to say a word. I knew what they were thinking. They were thinking, did the desk clerk give us the wrong room number, or did we misunderstand it, or is this an ambush? And so I saw all that, and I knew I had to, de-escalate the situation. So I stood up and I went like this, if you see my hands, to show I had nothing in my hands. And I walked forward and I extended my right hand and I said, "Hi, Mr. Kelly." I said, "I'm Daryl Davis." He looked at me and he shook my hand. So far, so good. And the bodyguard shook my hand. So, everything was coming down. I said, come on, please have a seat. He sat down. So far, so good. The bodyguard stood at attention on his right side. And right before I could sit down, he says to me, "Mr. Davis, do you have any form of identification?" I said, "Sure." And I produced my driver's license. He takes it and he goes, "Oh, you live on such and such street in Silver Spring." Now, I'm wondering, why is this man looking at my address? All he has to do is look at my picture, look at me, look at my name, identify me, and hand me back my license. He doesn't need to be looking at my street address, right? Is he going to come burn a cross in my lawn? I mean, what's up? So he had unnerved me a little bit, but I didn't want to let him know that. But I wanted to let him know that under no circumstances was he to, come unexpectedly or uninvited and for any, nefarious activity. And so I said to him, I said, "Yes, Mr. Kelly." I said, "That is my address. That is my street." I said, "And you live at," and I named his street and his house address. And because I knew it, from the guy telling me. And I did that intentionally just to let him know, if you come by and do something stupid and visit me, I'm going to come by and visit you because I know where you live too. So I was leveling the playing field and subliminally implying, if you visit me, you will have to deal with me.
Right.
So, we're going to confine all this visiting to this motel room. And he smiled, he nodded his head like he understood. But it was me, and I didn't realize that at the time, it was me who was being presumptuous. I had no reason to fear this man coming to my house to do something stupid. I found out much later, a few months down the road, that one of his Klan members lived right down the road from my house. And Mr. Kelly would have to travel down my street to get to that guy's neighborhood. And I had no idea at that moment. He simply recognized the street. Pure coincidence, nothing else. Today, that same guy is in a federal prison for committing a hate crime. He will be there for a long time. So anyway, we got on with this interview, and Mr. Kelly let me know that Black people are prone to crime, thus the reason that there are more Blacks in prison than white people. And, of course, this is half true. there are indeed more black people in prison than white people, but that's not the reason that they're prone to crime. There's an imbalance in the judicial system, but of course he's not seeing that, or he's not willing to see that, and it goes back to perspective. He sees more there, so therefore they must be more criminal, than white people. Okay, and then he let me know that black people are lazy. Well, we don't like to work. We prefer to scam the government welfare system. Now I'm sitting, right across the table from him. He's less than 3 feet away from me, and because those little tables in the hotel rooms are small, and I'm listening to him, and then he says that because I'm asking him, how do you hate black people, just because of the skin color, or Jewish people, or whatever. And these are his reasons. And he says that black people, our brains are smaller than white people. Therefore, we don't have the capacity to have the higher IQ, because that, the larger your brain, the higher the IQ, because you can have more information in there. This is what he's thinking. And so, it's like, a 40-watt light bulb to a 100-watt light bulb, that kind of thing. And I'm just, listening to him. And I let him get it all out. Now, here's the thing that's very important in terms of communication and things. Was what Mr. Kelly saying offensive? Yes, absolutely it was offensive. But now here's the difference in how I responded. Was I offended by it? No, not at all. Not because I agreed with what he was saying. I was not offended because it wasn't true. It did not apply to me. All right? And most people, if I sat there and told you because you have blonde hair or something, that you're stupid and you're lazy and you're probably prone to crime because of the color of your hair, you would find it offensive. And there'd be some blonde-haired girls who'd reach across and smack the crap out of me just for saying that.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's what he's used to. He's used to pushback. He's not used to having a conversation with someone he hates. He's used to having a debate and, clashing.
Because it triggers you.
Exactly.
You take that as a personal attack. You're attacking
Exactly.
me as a person.
So my view was, this is not a personal attack, because how can he attack me on that when he doesn't even know me, right? He just met me 5 minutes ago. So how can he assert all these allegations about me just based on this, the color of my skin? So why should I be offended by a lie? I know who I am. I cannot allow him to define me. So I just let him get it all out. And then when he finished, I said, well, Mr. Kelly, I said, I'm as black as anybody that you're talking about. I said, I don't have a criminal record. I have never been on welfare. I said, I've never measured my brain, but I'm sure it's the same size as anybody else's. Now, all the time knowing myself that, I had more education in my little fingernail than probably his whole Klan group put together. But I wasn't going to say that. But I just let him know, that, these things that he was talking about certainly did not apply to me. And, and we carried on with our conversations. There were some things that I agreed with, other things I did not agree with, that he said. And anytime he would mention the Bible, or the Bible says, Mr. Davis, I'd reach down into my bag and pull out my Bible and hand it to him. But see, the Klan claims to be a Christian organization. Mm-hmm. So they use the Bible to
justify, validate.
Exactly. And what they do is, they take whatever verse they can find and twist it to suit their narrative. All right. So I'd make them find the chapter and verse that defines what he's saying. And or if my cassette ran out of tape, I'd reach down, get a fresh tape, put it in. Well, every time I'd reach down, the bodyguard would reach up to his gun, which I understood because that's his job, right? Now, he doesn't know what's in the bag, and he's there to protect his boss. So I didn't have a problem with that. And after a while, he relaxed, the bodyguard. I went in and out of the bag. He didn't even move. And just maybe over an hour into this thing, we were just talking like you and I are right now. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, there was like a very short noise, like shh, but like that. It was there, and then it was gone. And we all jumped. And because the noise was so short, my ear.
Daryl, are you there? You're frozen on my
And because
screen.
I couldn't. Huh?
Okay, I got you back. You're
Okay,
frozen.
I froze? Okay. So I was saying, because it happened so fast, my ear could not discern what it was. And I kept trying to recreate it in my mind, all in a split second. So, what was that? But because I could not figure out what it was, I perceived it to be an ominous, threatening noise, given what I knew, A, about the Klan. They don't like Black people. 2, what that former Klansman had told me, don't fool with Roger Kelly, he'll kill you. Okay? So I didn't want to die that day. So already I'm thinking, all right, what did I say? What did I just do to cause this man to go off and make some bizarre noise that I can't explain? So I feared for my life at that point. And all in that split second, I jumped up out of my chair and I hit the table, because I'm getting ready to come across that table at them. And I was going to take them down. And when I hit the table, you go into, when you fear for your life, anybody, you go into what's called survival mode.
Yep.
Because you're going to protect yourself. And some people will pass out, they'll faint, because the threat is so great, the fear.
The adrenaline just,
Yeah, you can't process it.
Yeah.
And it short circuits your brain and you faint. I don't do that. Other people, they'll tense up and constrict. You've seen people who are in a fight, they fall on the floor and they curl up into a fetal position, and they don't even try to deflect the blows. They just, and they shake. They can't move. They're paralyzed, literally. That's called paralysis by fear. And I don't do that either. The third thing people will do is to run away. Something scares you, you run away. Just like, if you try to sneak up on a bird, it's going to fly off. That is your best option, to, as quickly as you can, separate yourself from the source of your fear. You just remove yourself. And I did not have that option, because you cannot outrun a bullet in a motel room. And I was not armed, neither was my secretary. The only person I knew for sure who was armed was the bodyguard. You could see his gun on his hip. I did not know if Mr. Kelly had a weapon up under his suit jacket or not. All I knew was at least one person has a gun. I don't have any. And so the fourth option you have is to do a preemptive strike, to get them before they get you. Preempt, the threat. And so that's what I was going to do. I was going to dive across that table, grab Mr. Kelly, grab the bodyguard, slam them down to the ground, and take away the bodyguard's gun. Because it's his job to protect himself and his boss. It's my job to protect myself and my secretary. And so I did not want to die that day. And when I came up and hit the table, I'm looking right into his eyes. And I didn't say a word. He didn't say a word, but we could read each other in that split second. My eyes were saying to him, and I knew he could read them, they were saying, "What did you just do?" And I could read his eyes just as easily. His eyes were saying to me, "What did you just do?"
Mm.
And the bodyguard was like looking back and forth between both of us, like, "What did either one of y'all just do?" and he had his hand on the butt of his gun. And so Mary, my secretary, she was sitting on the dresser next to my left. And because there were no more chairs there, she realized what had happened, and she began explaining it. And right as she was explaining it, it happened again. The ice cubes in the bucket had begun melting, and the cans of soda were like shifting down the ice. Yep. That kind of thing. That was it. And we all began laughing, all of us. And that was a moment of commonality. A Klan leader and a Black guy sitting in a motel room at the same table, agreeing, disagreeing, and now we're all laughing. But we were laughing at how ignorant we were, all of us. So we had that in common as well, our ignorance, you know? And I say that this was, I won't say it was a learning moment at that moment, but it was a teaching moment at that moment. The learning would come later. And the lesson learned is this: all because some foreign, and the operative word being foreign, underline it, underscore it, circle it, highlight it, all because some foreign entity of which we were ignorant, that being the bucket of ice, cans of soda, entered into our little comfort zone at the table via the noise that it made, we all became fearful of each other and accusatory because we were ignorant as to what caused that noise, right? So the lesson taught is this: ignorance breeds fear. We fear the things we don't understand. We fear those things of which we are ignorant, of which we are unaware. If you don't keep that fear in check, that fear will escalate and breed hatred because we hate the things that frighten us. Think about, let me finish. If you don't keep the hatred in check, the hatred will escalate and breed destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless and we were just ignorant. So think about people who go to some theme park, and there are people who want to get in line and get the thrill of riding the roller coaster or whatever. And the others, I hate roller coasters. You know, they scare the crap out of me. Well, there you go. They hate what scares them. You know, now they might not go and put a stick of dynamite under the roller coaster and destroy it, but you understand they hate what they fear. They're expressing that, right?
Even if they've never experienced it before.
Exactly. They just, they fear it, and I hate roller coasters. And to give you an example, I do probably 60 to 80 lectures a year all over this country and around the world, and mostly colleges and universities, corporations, police departments, churches, synagogues, etc. Mostly colleges and universities. But I also speak at elementary schools and middle schools and things like that. When I'm talking to little kids, like I'm talking to you right now, sometimes, we'll just be having a conversation. They're all, listening to me. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, I say, hey, there's a snake under your chair. Just out of the blue, I'll point down at the ground and say that. And do you know, almost every kid in the room starts screaming. Oh, and wow. every kid in the front row throws their legs up in the air because they think there's a snake under their chair, just at my suggestion. And of course, when they realize there is no snake, they start laughing and they're wondering, why did I do that? I said, why were you screaming? Why were you all excited about that? Oh, I'm afraid of snakes. I hate snakes. Okay, so there's your hate and there's your fear. And I say, well, why do you hate snakes? Why are you afraid of them? Oh, well, they're slimy. They're poisonous. Well, now there's your ignorance. If you've ever touched a snake, it's not slimy at all. It's dry. Huh?
Yeah, it's not slimy.
No. And not all snakes are poisonous.
Right.
So there's your ignorance. So the ignorance breeds the fear breeds the hatred. I hate snakes. I'm afraid of snakes. Mm-hmm. So then I pose the question. Now these are little kids, okay? I pose the question to them. I say, okay, so there's no snake under your chair. I was just joking, as you know. But let's just say there really was a snake under your chair. What would you want me to do about it? You know what they say? Kill it. Exactly. There's your destruction. Okay? Ignorance breeds fear. Fear breeds hatred. Hatred breeds destruction. Now, here is where this may be counterintuitive, but here is where we screw up. And again, my opinion, all right? Normally, what is intuitive is this. If you have a company and your subordinates, your employees down below, are screwing up, it's because they take their cues from the top. You need to address management, and management should take care of it because it trickles downwards, right? Mm-hmm. If management isn't doing what they should be doing, Why do you expect your employees to do it, right? So it's trickle down. But with this racism thing, you can't address it from the top down. You have to address it from the bottom up.
Exactly.
Okay, and
Yep.
you have ignorance on the bottom, fear, hatred, and destruction. That's when it escalates at the top. You can't address the destruction. I mean, once something is destroyed, that's it. It's not coming back. You know, when you destroy somebody's life, you kill somebody, nothing's going to bring them back.
Right.
So then you try to address the hatred, or you try to address the fear. No, those are symptoms. Those are byproducts of the main reason.
Exactly.
It's like, you know, if you got cancer in your bone, you can't put some topical cream on your skin or a Band-Aid. You know, you got to go down to the bone and put that radiation or chemo or whatever it is you're doing, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so addressing the fear and hatred is addressing the symptoms, not the source.
Yep.
So you go to the source, which is ignorance, and if you cure the ignorance, there is nothing to fear because you're no longer ignorant. You know, you fear what you don't know. If you cure the ignorance, there's nothing to fear. If there's nothing to fear, then there's nothing to hate. If there's nothing to hate, there's nothing to destroy. And there is a cure for ignorance. The cure is education and exposure. So that's what we should be working on, getting
Right.
people educated and exposing them to the things, that they don't know. And these are things that we have access to all around us.
Mm-hmm.
This is a melting pot of a country. And there's no reason why, we should not take advantage of all that we have to offer in terms of the different people that are here, the different cultures, the different things that we can learn,
Well, what would you say, things have changed so much from when you first started doing your research. And now with the internet, people try to prove their point based on the information they find. So confirmation bias, right? So
well, that's been going on for a long time, okay, because, you go back to even pre-internet. Well, I saw it on TV.
Yeah, that's true.
I read it in the paper.
So how do you address that? Because I feel like they're so convinced based on their trusted source that sometimes it's really hard to break through that.
It is. But for every internet fact, you can find one that counters it. And so you have to pose to them, so who's right and who's wrong? And then here's what you need to do. You don't want to call somebody stupid or call them ignorant,
right.
Because then you're going to get the pushback and then it becomes counterproductive.
Yep.
So what you do is this. A lot of people define ignorance and stupidity as being synonymous, right? So you got to separate the definitions and say, again, you don't imply that they're stupid or they're ignorant. You let them make up their own minds. You say, look, I don't know how you define ignorance and stupidity, but here's my definition. An ignorant person is someone who makes the wrong choice or decision because he or she doesn't have the facts or the proper information. If you give that person the facts, they can make the right decision. A stupid person is someone who has the facts and still makes the wrong decision. And so you can give an example. You might say, okay, so if somebody walks into a kitchen and there's a pot on the stove, you don't know whether it's hot or cold or what, because that's ignorance. You don't have the knowledge of it. And you go and put your hand on the handle and you burn yourself. It's due to ignorance. You didn't know. But if the chef is in the kitchen, he tells you, don't touch that pot. It's burning hot. It's been on the stove for an hour. And then he walks out and you go over there and touch the pot and you burn your hand. That's because you're stupid. You had the information and you refused to use it. So,
but at the same time,
mm-hmm.
could you not also argue that we shouldn't just believe everything we hear? I mean, I think that's a great example. You should trust the chef because he's in the kitchen. He should know. But I also think too, if you don't test it yourself and you just believe what somebody is telling you, is that not kind of the same thing? Like you're basing the facts off of what someone else tells you. It's kind of like sometimes you have to get burned to really know.
Right. Okay. But here's what I would do, and here's what you would do. Okay. We would get a potholder and approach with caution. That's the in between. Okay. So it may be hot, it may not be hot, but let me find out. You put that potholder or towel or, Bounty paper towel on it or whatever. If you feel heat in there, you know that you've done the right thing.
That's a good point. Yeah. Approach with caution.
Approach with caution, exactly, until you find out for sure. Let me interject here. At a lot of colleges and universities, and to your point, but here's what I've experienced. 2 to 3 out of every 10 lectures I give at these places, I'll do the lecture and then I'll do a Q&A, and I might bring some robes and hoods with me or whatever. And at the end of the lecture, there are always students who want to ask more questions, right? So they'll approach the podium and ask you whatever, or they want to touch the robe or whatever. Anyway, 2 or 3 out of 10 times, there'll be some student, he or she, standing over in the distance, just milling around over there, not doing anything. And I've come to learn what's going to happen. He or she is waiting for the crowd to go away from me. And when the crowd leaves, he or she will come up and approach me. And I've come to learn what they're going to say. And I just play dumb and just go about my business. And they're like, oh, hey, Mr. Davis, I really enjoyed your lecture, blah, blah, blah. I shake their hand, talk to them, thank you. And then they look around and make sure nobody is within earshot. And then they say, my mother is in the Klan, or my father's in the Klan, or whatever. And I was raised that way. And now I'm here at University of Alabama or whatever, and my boyfriend's from Pakistan, or my girlfriend is Black, or my boyfriend's Jewish, or whatever, and I can't bring them home. My parents will kill me. My parents will disown me, and I don't want to tell my friend because they'll drop me, if they know my parents are racist or whatever. So they've got this secret that is burning on their chest and causing them an ulcer, and they got to get it out, so I'm a good person for them to come and talk to. And so that's how they do that. And here's the problem, to your point, in their neighborhood, how they were raised, they're with these same people from kindergarten all the way through high school. And it's very homogenous in the neighborhood. Everybody goes to the same high school or whatever. They learn the same things. They probably vote for the same people, and they swim in the same community swimming pool, shop at the same grocery store, read the same books, etc., cheer the same football team, and now they come to college. In college, it's not the neighborhood.
Right.
It's people from all over the country and all over the world who are there at that university.
And they get exposure.
Right. And they find out, oh, Jewish people don't have horns, and Black people don't have tails, and gay people are not the way I perceive them, or whatever. And then they start dating one of these people. Well, how do they go home and tell their parents, you were wrong? Their parents wanted them to go and get an education, but they didn't want them to get that education and bring them back home, right? So, what do?
Yeah. So I'm really trying, and I'm hoping with this book I can enlighten people, as you've been doing, and get them to see that a lot of this is ingrained in us. Like, a lot of this is just how the human mind operates. We've all been there, just like you with the bucket of ice. Right? We all make assumptions. We all presume things that aren't true, but it's being aware of that and self-correcting for that. And I feel like we're just in such a state of fear at this moment, globally, that it's hard to kind of bring ourselves down to a level where we are open to hearing that, because we're in that self-preservation mode right now. And I think it's amazing what you have been able to accomplish through this. And my question to you is, you were always open-minded because you had so many experiences and you had exposure to so many different people, and that's what you knew. Mm-hmm. And I find it fascinating that whenever you experience that hate from other people, instead of getting offended, you were curious and you wanted to come from a place of understanding. And I don't feel like that's natural for most people. And it's not natural for me. I get very defensive and I can feel it. And I have to bring myself to that state of awareness and regulate my emotions and control it. And it's difficult sometimes, right? But it seems for you, it's a very natural, just part of who you are. Did you ever feel that defensiveness, or that, your heart start to race? And
sure, I feel anger when something stupid happens. Like, the cops shoot some black guy 40 times and he was holding his wallet and he was the wrong black guy that they were looking for, or whatever. I feel the anger there because I know it could be me. And I've been stopped before and harassed for no other reason than I'm black. I know that, and all, I feel those things, but I know some things you do and some things you don't do. And you want to be productive. Now, I've had my share of fights. I've had to hurt people, put people in the hospital, get people locked up, for attacking me. I'm not going to roll over and turn the other cheek and get slapped again.
Right.
I will fight and I will hurt somebody if it means, protecting myself or my family or something like that. I don't have a problem with that. People think, oh, Daryl's so, nonviolent, etc. Well, yes, that's not my first go-to, is to kick somebody's butt or something like that. No, that's not how you solve things. But if I don't have a choice, because there's some people, there's just no talking to them. They see you, they don't like you for whatever reason, and boom, they're on you just because you're black, or if you're gay, they're gonna go out and gay bash. They don't, you can't talk to them. And so if somebody starts doing that to me, yeah, I'm gonna fight back, and I'm gonna fight back to hurt you, that kind of thing, just out of self-preservation. But to your emotional thing, well, you look at it this way. If perhaps because, as you pointed out, I've had all this background, all this exposure, starting as a young child when my mind was like sponging in everything, that I was seeing. Had I not had all that, perhaps, and I'd grown up here in my own country my whole life, would I be doing this today? Maybe not. Maybe not. So that's the part of me that empathizes with those who've not had what I've had. Okay. As I look behind you, I see all these diplomas or degrees or awards on your wall. I mean, I'm assuming these are yours, and you have earned these things. And there are many people who might lash out at you and this, that, and the other, who don't have those things because they have not gone through what you have gone through to acquire the knowledge that you have. So how do you beat up on them or get very defensive, get very angry, knowing that those people, they have less of the education? It doesn't make them bad people.
Right.
It just makes them a little less knowledgeable than you are when it comes to certain things. And they're lashing out of you based on ignorance, not based on knowledge. So, how do you, attack those people? That's what I ask myself, before I get angry because I'm told I'm a criminal, or I'm on welfare, or my brain is small, or something like that. Things like that. Now, back to your emotional thing. I've put some thought into this, and I don't have the educational background that you do. You probably have something in psychology or something. I don't. My educational background has been in music. My degree, I have a BA in fine arts in music, and but what I've thought a lot about how people think, because I've tried to rationalize something. Now, I don't know, whether you're a Trump supporter or a non-Trump supporter, and it doesn't really matter. Okay. I have a lot of friends who are on both sides, good friends who are on both sides. I deal with a lot of white supremacists and neo-Nazis and all this kind of stuff. I've made this observation, and I've said it many times in many interviews. Not everyone who voted for Donald Trump is a racist, but every racist voted for Donald Trump. You see the difference?
Yeah.
So how is it that people who are not racist, and they're educated, and we're good friends, and they have white collar executive jobs.
Oh yeah.
And they vote for this guy, and then you got these people who have no education, they're racist, they're white supremacists, and they vote for the same guy. I don't get it. And this guy goes around grabbing women by the crotch and bashing Mexicans and bashing, Black people and gay people and women,
and a lot of religious people. That's what.
Yeah,
exactly.
Me. Exactly.
It goes against your core moral values.
Yes, exactly.
But then you justify it and say, well, everybody makes mistakes.
Right. The hypocrisy there.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's talk about the religion for a second, but let me get there. So I'm trying to get my head around like, how do these polar opposites? Because the people that I know who are not racist, highly intelligent people would never associate with the Ku Klux Klan. How is it that they both are on the same page when it comes to Donald Trump? What I have, and I could be wrong, and you would know better than me, and I'll listen to you. What I am trying to figure out is this. People, as you know, are complex, and more complex than I would know because you study the people. But I have whittled them down to two categories: people who are emotional and people who are logical. And we all fall into one of those two categories. But there is crossover. Like somebody who is basically a logical person may, upon occasion or whatever, rely on emotions to make a decision. People who are emotional predominantly may every now and then rely on logic to make a decision. But my guess is that Trump supporters are more emotional people than logical, which explains why you have these two polar opposites voting for the same person. Fear is an emotion. Power is an emotion. And Donald Trump appeals to people's emotions. People are fearing, people who don't look like me are coming into my country, and taking my jobs, and we need to build that wall. We need to be more powerful and blah, blah, blah. That's an emotional thing going on. And that's what he is pandering to, their emotions, where a logical person realizes this is bullshit, Like, for example, like I said, I don't drink, I never have drank, but let's just say that I'm an alcoholic, all right? I have been sober now for, let's say, 2 years. I went through the AA 12 steps and whatever it is that they do over there, okay? So now I've been 10 years sober. Coronavirus hits. I own a restaurant or a store or whatever. It gets shut down, I'm losing business. I can't pay my mortgage. The bank is knocking on my door to foreclose on my house. I can't support my family. My wife is getting mad. She's divorcing me. I'm losing everything because of this coronavirus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the emotional Daryl Davis would say, man, I need that drink, to escape, right? But the logical Daryl Davis would say, okay, listen, you've already lost your business, you've lost your restaurant, whatever, but you can rebuild. Don't throw away 10 years of sobriety. Put that bottle down. That's the logic. So a logical person is going to say, hey, wait a minute. I have a mother. I have a sister. I have a daughter. I have a wife. I'm not going to vote for a president who's going to grab one of these women in my life by her crotch. Or call them horse face or whatever else, these other
bullying.
terms. Yeah, exactly.
Bullying.
Why would I do that when when there are women in my life? You know, that's the logic.
Mm-hmm.
But the emotion says, well, you know, he's really patriotic. You know, he really believes in America. He's standing
It's going
up
to
for
bring
us.
the economy
He's
back.
going to bring the economy back and the power, you
Secure our
know?
borders.
Yeah, exactly. So that explains to me, at least in my mind, it doesn't matter how much money you have or how much education you have. It doesn't matter. If you are wired for emotion, that's what appeals to you. That's why a Klansman and a corporate president can be on the same page if they both are emotional people.
So on emotion, all of us are emotional because we're emotional beings. And the way our brain is structured, there's 3 parts, which I'm sure you've heard of the reptilian brain. And that just makes everything work, right? And then we have our limbic system, where it is the emotional brain, and then it goes up to the cortex, which is our rational brain. So before we can ever get to rational, we have to pass through the emotional. The difference, however, is the people that can proceed to that rational state do not let it stop at the emotional level. So they kind of override that. And it kind of goes through that loop anyways, but some people just redirect because the emotional is so much more intense and powerful, and they just react on that emotion. So, but I understand exactly what you're saying about emotional and rational, and that's really true. And when we can't process, or when we can't control and manage those emotions, then you're right, we react. And a lot of that's based on fear, and then it just escalates from there. And we're also very egocentric by nature. And so it's all about preserving the self. So we don't always think about, well, how is this policy? Yes, I might get my job back if I work in a coal mine, but how is this going to affect the future for my kids and generations to come? How is it going to impact the world as a whole? We don't want to see that. We only want to think about the now. And that's another problem, is not seeing ahead, seeing the consequences of these impulsive reactions. I just know I want a job, and I want it now. I just know I want to feel safe. So do whatever it takes for that to happen, and let's not worry about the repercussions of that, right? And what scares me is technology has allowed us to have, I mean, we don't ever have time to really think anymore. We have time to think. People aren't taking the time to think anymore. We're always engaged. And if we're always engaged, we never have time to be mindful and be present and to come from a place of understanding. And it's literally hardwiring our brains, kids nowadays, with video games and constant access to technological devices. It is hardwiring our brains to think faster than ever before. And that's why attention deficit disorder, ADD, ADHD, is skyrocketing. And it's always been there. But studies have shown that the more screen time kids have between, birth to 3 to 5 years of age, their brains are getting hardwired. And it's hard to focus and concentrate and take the time that they need to process things rationally. And that's scary because we're already in a rational society as a whole.
Right. And also the news is not the news anymore, it's opinion. So we're already being told what to believe. Exactly.
And nobody asks why. And think about when you were a kid, and I'm sure your parents maybe, and I'm making an assumption here, but from what you've told me, I would imagine that they enjoyed you asking questions. They encouraged that. Whereas some parents just get really frustrated and annoyed. Why, Mom? Why? It's like, stop asking why. This is the answer. Don't ask me again. And so they suppress that urge to be curious, which is what we desperately need right now, is curiosity. And we're teaching people to not question authority, to take whatever is given to them as the facts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything we're doing is counterproductive to catalyzing positive change and understanding.
And so what I think one of the things that I've done that has worked in my favor in these people converting themselves from that ideology is I have appealed to their emotions. As you said, we all have some irrationality about us or whatever. And people always ask me, it doesn't make sense, Daryl. Why would a Klansman sit down and have dinner with you? That's just not, they can't get their head around that because it's not rational. If
Right.
you're in the Klan, you hate Black people, now you're going to sit down and have dinner with one? I mean, what's up with that, right? It makes no sense. But to me, it makes perfect sense because you're dealing with irrationality. And first of all, it's irrational to be racist, right? To judge somebody by the color of their skin, that's irrational. So if you're irrational already, you're going to do more irrational things, like sit down and have dinner with that very same person that you hate, because you're already irrational. So that makes perfect rationale to me. That's how I view it. And so I appeal to their emotions. I appeal to their humanity. Yeah, and as you said at the very beginning of this interview, you said people want to talk, they want to be heard. Yes, indeed, they do. And if you shut them down, there's no reason for them to listen to you.
Exactly.
So I give them what they want. I give them that power, to express themselves, even though I may not like what they're saying. I afford them that, and that gives them a good feeling. I guess it helps the serotonin in their brain or whatever. But I appeal to those emotions, and then they're more willing and receptive to what I'm saying because I've given them a platform. Even though they hate me, they may be willing to reciprocate because of what I have allowed them. And then in my expressing my platform, I'm planting a seed. But the important thing is not just planting the seed, but returning to nurture it and water it to make it, grow. And so I'm appealing to their emotions, and they end up like, Daryl isn't so bad. And they began thinking about what I say. And then here's what happens. And you can explain this cognitive dissonance thing, where, they're not going to admit anything right in front of you because, they come there with a steel wall to protect whatever it is they tribalize, right? Mm-hmm. But then they go home and in their own privacy, they're thinking, what that Daryl guy said is right, but he's Black. But he's right, but he's Black. And it goes back and forth. And then they have to come to a decision. What he said was true, and he is Black. So do I turn my life around and believe the truth, or do I continue living a lie? And that's their decision, not mine.
Right. They have to choose where they're going to explore. Are they going to feed that cognitive dissonance they already have?
Right.
Or that bias, that confirmation bias, the confirmation bias, or are they going to try to confirm maybe
their lie?
It's like you said, their choice.
Yeah, and see, when you see my name in the media a lot, it will say, Black musician converts 200 Klansmen, or Black musician converts blah, blah, blah. No, I did not convert anybody. I was the impetus for over 200 people.
Yeah.
But they converted themselves. I just gave them reason to come to that conclusion.
And that's the problem. People try to change people. Mm-hmm. You can never change people. And when you try to, you're being counterproductive because they attach to their belief even more strongly than they did before. Mm-hmm. And so it's counterproductive. And another thing is, again, back to us being egocentric as human beings, it's I need to have my point heard and then I'll listen to you. It's always me first.
Right.
Whereas you're doing the opposite. It's like, let me hear you. And then if you're open to it, you will hear me. And that's what people need to start doing. But the problem is, as soon as that person starts talking, they say something you don't agree with, and that person's, well, I'm listening, but I want to correct you first. Instead of letting, like you said, let them get it all out. It's like trying to put your hand on a water hose, right? It's going to spray out, and it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess. So let the water run out. When it's done, then it's your turn. But yeah, people just react. They've got to start.
And if you're confident in what you think and what you believe, then you shouldn't have any fear of the other person spewing whatever it is they're going to spew, because you'll be able to defend yourself when they get done. It's those people who keep trying to cut you off, that maybe they're afraid that the truth might come out or something, and they don't want to hear it.
Yeah. A lot of people say I'm listening when they're really not. They're just waiting for that other person to stop talking so they can say something. And they probably couldn't sum up a word of what the person was just saying. And if they do try to sum it up, it's usually twisted. I call we have Swiss cheese communication. That's what I call it.
Is it called what? Switch what?
Swiss cheese.
Oh, Swiss cheese, the holes in it. Okay.
Yeah. So we have this picture in our minds exactly what we want to say. And when we speak, it doesn't always come out the way we have the picture in our head. So our message is never fully coming out, and usually emotions present themselves versus the underlying message. And then at the same time, whenever you're communicating a message that's not solid, the other person is going to fill those holes, because we do not like holes in communication.
Right.
So if you're not very thorough and precise in your message, then somebody else is going to fill in the blanks. And usually it's based on their bias or perceptions or whatnot, or they're just going to misinterpret what you say.
And just like, I was saying earlier that in the case of addressing racism and things like that, we got to start from the bottom up, counterintuitively. When we say these people are not dealing with reality, and we try to change their reality, that's wrong. Because you're not going to change who somebody is. Only they can do that. So instead of trying to change their reality, let's offer them different perspectives. Because one's perspective is one's reality. And so if you try to attack their reality, ain't going to happen. So what you do is, you give them another perspective. And if they gravitate towards your perspective, then it will affect their reality, it will impact their reality. Exactly.
Well, thank you, Daryl. You don't know how much it means to me for you to contact me back, and your willingness to speak with me today.
Anytime. Just let me know if you want to do it again.